Welcome back to the channel. So we're going to take this perfectly good running engine out of this Ford 5000. This is a 233 cubic inch 4-cylinder gas engine, and we're going to stuff in something a little more interesting. So this is what I found. I've got myself here a 1989 Brazilian engine out of a Ford L8000. This is a 7.8 liter 6-cylinder turbo diesel. This is going to be the new heart and soul of that Ford 5000. Stick around and I'll show you the lengthy process of putting a 6-cylinder in a 4-cylinder tractor. Okay, so here she is. We're just going to wake this old tractor up from its winter sleep and get it out of its little hiding spot here for the winter. Gonna load this sucker up, and this will probably be one of the last times this tractor moves under its own power with this little engine before we stuff that big old 6-cylinder in there. Got the bush hog on it still wearing its field clothes. Let's get this loaded up. That thing's not going anywhere. Okay, here we go, guys. She's all loaded up, strapped down. That starter has been sticking for a while, as you can see by the hammer marks. That's not going anywhere. That very well may be one of the last times this Ford turns this bush hog. But I hope not, because this is a great tractor. I just don't know what's going to happen with it after I put that big motor in it. Okay guys, I've been looking for one of these 7.8 liter engines for a long time, and one finally came across my radar and I had to go buy it. So it's wintertime here. I had to borrow my dad's trailer to go get it because this little trailer that I wanted it on, because it's easy to move around, was stuck in the mud and I couldn't even get to it without tearing up my whole property. So anyway, the guy took this out for me. I got to go hear it run before he took it out. This was 1,500 bucks, and guys, these are getting hard to find. Like, they haven't made these for 30 years. This is a 1991, I believe it was a 91 L8000. So for 1,500 bucks, I mean, this thing had 350,000 miles on it, which, I mean, it fired right up. I mean, this thing, there was hardly, it was in good shape, let's just say that.
Just breathe on that key. Oh, that's awesome. Oh,
it's so anyway, I had to go run to get it, scramble to get it home. I weighed it there. You saw it weighed around 2,000 pounds, but there's a lot of extra junk on here which is going to come off. Flywheel, clutch, that's all. I'll leave them. I'm going to save the clutch, I think, for my truck. That's an M11 Cummins with a 10-speed. It might work for that, I don't know. The big, what is it, a 48 MT? That starter might come, oh, 37 MT, that might come off. Alternator, the big fan, obviously we don't need air brakes, So that big air compressor is going to come off. Coolant tank, obviously. A bunch of little stuff. I think we'll lighten this thing up by 300 or 400 pounds. So let's get tearing into this thing and see what we've got underneath all this extra junk. Okay, I was going to do a time lapse and I was going to do a video taking all this stuff apart, but I don't think I'm going to bother because I'm constantly having to go back and forth into the shop and get tools and wrenches and everything else. So I'm just going to fast forward to a lot of this. As you can see, I've got this plastic on this turbo. Now I can leave it outside safely without having to worry about anything getting in the engine. I'm just going to go ahead and strip all this stuff off and I'll show you what it looks like after all this stuff is stripped off. Here's some of the junk I removed. It's an air compressor, alternator, the fan. I might try to sell some of this stuff on Marketplace just to recoup some of the funds here from buying the motor. But as you can see, it looks a lot different. Got all the wiring off of here for the alternator and various sensors. Looks a lot cleaner, starting to look like a bare motor. I'm going to leave this bracket on until the end just because that's kind of nice to chain onto. I don't know about this whole water pump system. That might come off, but for now I'm going to leave it. And I'm going to leave this power steering pump until the end too, because that might even work for the tractor. As you can see, it's starting to look a lot different. Yeehaw! Sweet. I wonder if it's a 2-disc clutch. These bolts are awfully long for a single disc. Are you a twin disc clutch? How many discs? Let's see. Yes, looks to be a twin disc clutch. Yeehaw. You know, that's actually not that bad of a clutch. In case any of you guys were curious, this is not a 15-inch clutch. This is only a 14-inch clutch. So maybe it's, I don't know how they count that, maybe it's 13.5 inch. But whatever case is, that's a whole lot of useful weight to somebody who's got one of these trucks. Check it out, guys. That's one of those clutch brakes, those bolt together clutch brakes. Those things are always kind of a joke, because what happens is you have to torch off the old one, because that's a one piece that goes around the input shaft, and then these kind of bolt on like a horseshoe. But that's probably been down in there for quite a while, so it's a miracle that never caught the ring gear on the flywheel. The original clutch brakes, for those of you who don't know, this is so that when you put the clutch in on a big truck, it stops the input shaft of the transmission so you can get the truck in gear. The original ones are a one-piece design. These are a two-piece so that you can clamp around the transmission shaft, the input shaft, so you don't have to drop the whole transmission just to replace one. So it's a wearable item, pretty common to see. As you can see, there's 8 bolts in the flywheel. This will not work with the tractor. The flywheel from the tractor will not work with this. You can try to drill new holes in the flywheel. That's not exactly the safest thing. And if you ever plan on adding any kind of power to one of these things, which I don't know why you'd want to put one of these engines in your tractor if you weren't doing it for the power, it's not going to hold up. So you got to get a custom-made flywheel. So I'm going to talk more about that later on. I just wanted to show you guys while I'm here what that looks like. Or maybe not. Wow. Gonna have to use something different. A lot of corrosion in there. You know, judging by the look of the corrosion on those bolts, I'll be willing to bet that has been in there for a long time. Oh man, she's heavy. Wow, so there it is. And there that is. There is oil right there, so I'm going to replace that rear main seal while I'm in here. But that flywheel, I'd say, is pretty roached. But I'm going to save it. It might come in handy. These bolts, 1, 2, take a 15/16 socket. And I've already broken those loose with that big old monster breaker bar. These ones up here, though, however, take an inch. You can see that with a light. 1.125". For some reason, they have a different head on the bolt. I'm sure it's a bigger bolt. And then these ones over here, again, 15/16. So I'm going to go ahead and run those out, and that puppy can come right off of there. As you can see, the whole thing comes right off as a unit. Now I can just take this starter off. Pretty easy. Well, easier than when it was on the end. We're just going to set it like that for now to get that starter off. And there you can see the bare block. This engine has gotten quite a bit smaller. It looks like it's a much more manageable size now. It's got all the extra nonsense from the truck off the engine. So now what I'm going to start doing is putting some degreaser on this thing, just so I can kind of see what I'm working with here. Underneath all this grease, I'm sure, is a gray engine. Looks to be anyways. So let's get at it. So here we are. It took 3 separate transactions, I guess you'd say. One application of the degreaser, then pressure wash it. Another application, and then pressure wash it. So it took quite a while. Quite a bit of degreaser went on, a whole gallon just about. But there was some caked on grease. Like, some of this stuff in here was just so thick. Been on there for probably the better part of 20 years. So anyway, that's actually a pretty nice looking paint job on this thing, really. It's got a new power steering pump we might be able to reuse. That'll be nice. Nice. So now we can kind of see what we're dealing with underneath all that grease. This injection pump had been redone at one point. I don't know if you can see that or not, but that's Atlantic fuel injection out of, I think, Windham, Maine. That pump's been off there at one point, so that makes me feel a little better, because this thing did fire right up and it ran great. So I'm hoping that that'll be a good pump for years to come. So we'll see. Probably the last time this tractor runs with that motor in it. Let's get started. We are going to start on disassembly. So first things first, this big grill guard, I made this a couple years ago. That thing has been awesome. See if I can link a video to that in the description, but that thing has been great. If I did another one though, I'd probably make this wider and make this extend further too, just so that front end has total protection. But let's get at it. The hoods on these things come off really easy. Pretty much the same thing as an old, like, mid-30s Ford or mid-30s Chevy. Really nice. So I'm gonna have to extend this hood somehow whenever I put that 6-cylinder in there, but now it'll lift off. Getting a little bit done here pretty quick. So let's get the battery ripped off, get the radiator off. What else? I'm gonna have to get these parts put away somewhere so they don't fall and get damaged, because I want to reuse all this tin. It's crazy to think that all this work that I did to this tractor is going to be pretty much for nothing at this point. But I have been using the tractor a lot over the years. So like this battery hold down that I custom made, just did a water pump on this. You know, I took this thing all apart and painted it all up really nice, rebuilt the carburetor. I did a lot of videos on this, guys. So if you're a new viewer to the channel, go back and check out some of my old stuff, because I went through this thing. I redid the rims. Those are all rotted with calcium. I redid the whole front end of this tractor. I mean, I made a lot of videos with this tractor. So this is kind of where it all started for me on YouTube, guys. So it's kind of cool, a little bittersweet going back through the tractor, you know, seeing all this stuff that I did years ago. But you know what? I've had an itch to do this conversion for a long time, to put this 6-cylinder in here, so let's keep on going, taking more stuff apart. All these battery cables, I just had those all custom made. Now we're going to be taking it all off. All right, so this thing here, this exhaust heat shield guard that I made, the internet has a love-hate relationship with this thing. A lot of people were saying this was a fire hazard, it was a disaster waiting to happen, and blah blah blah. I'm going to take it off now, and I'm probably not going to use it again, because the 6-cylinder is going to have a big old turbo sitting right here, and I'm going to have a big chrome stack going up through the hood. I'm probably never going to use this low exhaust. So if anyone wants this low exhaust and that big heat shield, if you're local, I mean, I could sell it to you. I don't think I could ship that thing. That would weigh, it probably weighs 150 pounds. So anyway, if anyone wants it, let's give me a shout out. I'll probably have it somewhere in my shed or whatever. But I'm not going to be using a downward facing exhaust. I thought it was cool whenever I first got the tractor, but if I ever do anything with a 4-cylinder again, I'm going up through the hood like it was originally. I'm ditching this downwards exhaust. Some people like it with orchards and stuff, you know, and whatever. There it is. It's going, guys. So there's a drain petcock. I don't know if you can see that or not. Right there. And this is like the messiest way to drain a radiator I've ever experienced. So you kind of just got to put the bucket down there and let it go. There's like multiple streams going on, but whatever. I don't know why they didn't just put a tube down there or something to help drain that, but maybe that's what I'll do if I reuse this radiator. Here it is without the radiator. You can see all the goodies down in there, the power steering. It's actually quite an interesting setup on these tractors. So anyway, I'm working on now getting the dash off. It's pretty much all off, but I'm having to undo a bunch of linkages and stuff like that. So I need to take the steering wheel off. This dash will just lift right off, not a big deal. And then, as you can see here, the fuel tank is supported in there, and that fuel tank's got to come off as well, because I've got these two big, can you see that? I've got two big bellhousing bolts up here. That's going to be really difficult to do with the fuel tank in place. Plus, I have to modify this fuel tank for the diesel. So, as you can see, this stuff is just kind of being held on there. I'm not sure if this plate I'll be able to reuse. This bolt's on the back of the head. So I've got the throttle linkage undone. Pretty much now I just got to undo the choke. All right, this one's the choke. Got to undo that and then take the steering wheel off, and that dash can come right off. This is the starter, and that's why we were having all the starter issues, guys. It looks like there's no bushing left in that thing, so that would be why. These things get wore out. Anyway, so that starter is effectively junk. It's going in the scrap pile. We're getting stripped down, guys. All right, that steering wheel was a pain in the butt to get off, but we got it and didn't damage that too badly. So this is the fuel tank. As you can see, there's just a couple more bolts here, one down there, and then those two bolts here are all that held that fuel tank on there. Seems kind of easy to take off. Hopefully save this fuel tank. It's been a good fuel tank, and I think I can make it work with the diesel fuel, so I might have to replace the sending unit. The plan is to drill 2 holes, one here and one there. I'm going to put a feed in there and a return for the fuel system on the diesel. So I'm going to have to do some working on this anyway. Once you get the tin off of these tractors and the fuel tank, they really don't look that big. So anyway, here's the 2 bolts that are now exposed, and this bracket here bolts to the back of the head. I'm thinking that this is going to bolt to the back of the new engine, but we're going to have to find that out. So anyway, we're getting progress, guys. That thing is hanging on for dear life. Golly. All right. There is the underside muffler. That's all that held it on. Right there was one bolt back. Figured I'd just make a quick video showing these hoses, because these hoses are all one, kind of. Even though they're two separate hoses. These hoses are joined right here in this clamp that bolts underneath the radiator. And this is kind of a nest, if you will. And these are always breaking. So I made this bracket in a video a long time ago. So the tie rod's off. I'm working on right now getting that drag link off of the steering box. Tie rod is off there. I'm working on making a cradle underneath the engine so that I can get this thing ripped off. Okay, that took a bit of thinking, but basically I've got the engine and transmission blocked up. That's basically what it looks like. I've still got room enough to get these bolts through. Everything's clear, nothing's hitting. That baby ain't going nowhere. So the front end is completely off the ground. I'm gonna disassemble the front end, take the axle out. Sorry about the shadow, guys. Then I'm gonna take the whole front end off the tractor, and it's just gonna be the engine dangling there. So we made a pretty good progress today. Just about time to call it a day. So that's what that looks like, guys. And I'm gonna use the tractor probably and remove this, but whenever it comes time to put the new engine in, I'm gonna have to use my engine crane, I think. Just wanted to show you guys, if you're taking this drag link off, it's next to impossible to get in there with anything, but use this pickle fork, put the steering all the way to the right, and beat on that, and you'll get that out of there. This is what I mean by that drag link. Connects to the steering box. So basically what I do, as you can see, put this back to somewhat middle, and that's how we get that out of there. As you can see, I just loosened this up. So by now I'm sure some of you are wondering, like, Mark, why aren't you using your nice shop to do this project in instead of doing this outside? Well, and here's the reason. I gotta work for a living, unfortunately, so I gotta put windshields in. And outside here, this is where my projects go, especially if they're gonna be apart for a long time. I can't put this in the shop, have never-ending projects in here, because this is where I make my money out of these two bays. So anyway, that's why we're working outside. So I'm going to stop and take a minute to show you guys how these front suspensions work, just because whenever I was doing research I couldn't find anything out there. So basically there's this big pin that drives all the way through this, I guess you'd call this a bolster. So anyway, this pin more or less just goes like that into this front saddle. Now if you look at the oil pan right here, there's a big area cast in the oil pan that this pin in this shim, obviously the shim goes in between, but this goes in here like that, captures this front piece here, or the rear piece, whatever you want to call it. So in case you guys can't tell, the oil pan is a very crucial part of this front axle. Obviously we're not going to be able to reuse this because this doesn't fit. The Ford 7810 is the only tractor on the planet that I found that has this right here, but for a 6-cylinder that would fit the 401 series tractor. However, those are impossible to find. I've gave up looking. So basically what I'm going to have to do is turn this axle 180 degrees so that this piece is hanging out the front, and then make a new bracket to hold the front. It won't really look all that bad. That's the only real way I can think of doing it. Anyway, guys, moving on. All of this stuff in here is going to have to be removed because there's not enough room for the harmonic balancer of the big engine. I mean, look how close that is. Not enough room for a harmonic balancer. So anyway, let's get this thing off, and then we can get this engine out of here. And then we can finally see what we're dealing with and what's left of this tractor. It's starting to look pretty small now. What was once a big tractor is now just a little one. Alright, so that was a successful engine removal. Now, I don't know if you could see from the footage, but the engine came out pretty hard actually. And I think what was happening was the PTO drive is wearing just a little bit. I don't think it's wearing enough to warrant a replacement of that shaft, but there's a little burr right on the end, and I think that's what was holding it from coming out. This input shaft looks really nice. So anyway, guys, super happy. It's been a successful day here. Engine is out. I'm going to take now, once we get some more daylight, I'm going to take the flywheel off and the clutch. And then this ring right here, this metal plate I should say, needs to come off. And I'm going to take that over to the new engine, the new diesel, put that on there and see how these holes are going to match up. So anyway, guys, I'm going to head in for the night. It's been a busy day. We've got the outside candles burning, so we've run out of moonlight. We've run out of daylight, I should say. Now we're running on moonlight. Whatever. You guys get the idea. It's late. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. See you guys in the morning. I don't recommend using a tractor to remove an engine, guys, but I wanted this engine out, and that was the only thing I had here at the moment that could do it. So whenever I go to put the new engine in, I'm going to actually build a big, heavy plywood floor so I can use my engine crane, because the new engine I got to be really careful to put in the tractor. So anyway, this is out. I can now see how many splines I have so I can get my flywheel ordered. Splines on the PTO, splines on the clutch. So I got to get that ordered because that may take a couple weeks to get. But here we are. All right, we're back in the outside garage here, and as you can see, the roof leaked last night, so I had to put a tarp over this. Anyway, let's get to work. I'm going to pull the clutch off this and the flywheel so we can get to that engine plate. So check it out, guys. This clutch looks to be in extremely good shape. Before I bought the tractor, the guy must have had this clutch put in because that doesn't have a lot of hours on it. That is really nice. The flywheel doesn't have really any checking either, any heat checking or slipping, just a normal ridge. But this here, guys, is the PTO drive. This unbolts and is separate from the flywheel. So if you look in there, you can see the splines for the PTO shaft. And this is the, I guess you'd call it the pilot bushing in a normal situation, or this is a pilot bearing. That supports the end of the drive spline for the transmission. So this is a 2-shaft unit. Let's get this flywheel off. Okay, so I've got the bolts out and I just loosened this thing up. Now, this PTO drive, hold on guys, I'm only so strong with one hand. This PTO drive, come off of there. Okay, this PTO drive, as you can see, there's a flywheel and the flywheel goes past the lip on the crank. And this PTO drive extends into the crank. So basically that centers itself inside the crank right here. So this part is gonna have to be made into the new flywheel. Curious as to how they do that, but they say they can do it. So we'll just have to wait and see, I guess. But I can't really reuse this flywheel because this is a 6-hole. The new engine is an 8-hole. And this is not true spacing either. These are not true, so I think these two are closer than the rest. So they do that so you only put it on one way. Okay, let's rip that off. Okay, there's your flywheel, guys, and I'm going to keep all this stuff just in case I have any issues down the line. Looks like there's some kind of seal there, which is very interesting. And there's 3 3/8 bolts that hold that shield on there, or that plate, I guess they call it. So let's tear into that. I gotta go put this stuff somewhere out of the rain so it won't get ruined. And this, I need to count all these splines to make sure that the new flywheel I get has the same setup as this right here. And as you can see, that sits down inside the flywheel ever so precisely. I assume they do that just for centering so that it's not relying on the holes to center itself. So, one shop I talked to, guys, will actually weld these holes full and then they'll re-drill these holes. And then they'll make a flywheel that looks just like this. That's the Kenny Performance one. Now there's an Atlas clutch in Minnesota, I think they are, and they actually manufacture this hub with the spline, and they bolt it into the flywheel and it becomes one unit. I'm not quite sure which one I'm going to go with. They're both pretty similarly priced, but from what I've seen, the Atlas has a little bit better pressure plate system for a 2-disc. So anyway, I still have more research to do and more calling, but for now, I need to get this plate off the engine. Let's go. Let's see what's in behind here. Let's see. Dowel pin is holding. Be careful though, I don't want to bend this if I can help it. That could have been also why that engine didn't want to separate, because that dowel pin has a lot of rust around it. Okay, so this is what the back of the plate looks like. Some of that gasket material left. That's interesting. There's some weird bug in there that's probably 100 years old. So here's the bare engine, guys. It's interesting. One thing I see has this same cover here, where it's like basically a big freeze out plug. So the rear main seal is interesting on this. I'm not quite sure. I've never really seen a rear main seal on one of these tractors, so maybe it's totally normal, but does appear to be leaking just a little bit. So anyway, this is old engine. We're not going to be using this. One thing I want to note before we go to the new engine, the location of these 3/8 holes, and also this line right here. That'll be important on the new engine. Here we are at the back of the new engine, and as you can see, there are 3, I guess you'd call them castings, in the block, ready so I can drill and tap the holes. And also, the dowel pins, same location, same size and everything. So let's go ahead and put that new plate on the engine and see what it looks like. Okay. One dowel pin. There's the second dowel pin, which doesn't go on very well. Okay, so there it is, guys. We can see this hole, this hole, this hole, and this hole of the bell housing all line up perfectly. However, this is a problem up here. As you can see, the holes that we need are very high. They don't fit. So, however, the location of these 3 holes is perfect, so I can drill and tap those. My dowel pins locate everything. So, what I have in mind is this. I'm going to drill a new hole right here, and I'm going to tap it for a bolt. Now, people think, that's crazy. You don't want to do that. You might ruin the block. Worst case scenario, I drill into a coolant passage, and I have a little hole there, and I'll have to fix it. Or put some sealant in behind the bolt. However, this one here, see how the block steps down in? I don't know if it shows up very well on camera. There's a big bulge here where the block has a casting for a hole, but then it steps way down in. The problem is, this might not have, I might not be able to put a bolt there. So worst case scenario, I'll have one bolt here, no bolt here. Or what I can do, I may just put like a 3/8 bolt, and I'll machine a big bushing to go in there, just so that it doesn't have, I mean, a 3/8 bolt is better than nothing. Another idea I'm toying around with, guys, is not drilling the block, but building a nice thick bushing using the original bolts, and then making more or less coming down and in, and I'll make a pin to go in the original casting. It's kind of hard to describe, but I'm thinking of different things that I can use, and I could weld in a nice heavy bracket, and then I could make pins to go in here, like dowel pins basically, and that I could make a really nice tight fit for these bolts here. So I'm thinking I may do that instead of drilling the block, but I don't know. I gotta figure it out. I gotta do some thinking, guys, because I could easily make a big block, and I could make some reinforcements going up to these bolts here to make it super strong. And also I'm gonna make a frame stiffener down here that's gonna connect the front. So this will be plenty rugged. Most of the action is gonna be trying to twist the engine like this, not necessarily breaking it like this. So whenever you have these engines twisting, you know, because that's what they do, engines twist. They don't necessarily go like this. So this is gonna be wanting to twist. So anything I can do to help hold will be greatly improved. So anyway, I will get back to you guys. I may have to do some grinding on the tractor bell housing to fit this water neck, but I want to maintain that. I want that oil cooler in the worst way. So it's gonna stay. So anyway, guys, wanted to show you everything fits on this sucker. I mean, other than just these top 2 bolts, which we can address. Yeah. So we have the plate back on the tractor side of things now. And as you can see, this line right here for this plate, that kind of gives me an area to grind so that I can grind that down for the water neck. I shouldn't have to grind too far. I can literally probably just make a chunk like that. So anyway, guys, things are looking really good here. My thought was about these bolts. I'm still going to do some thinking on that. I'll let you guys know what I decide, but I only have to grind that much to let that water neck pass. So here we are at the 7.8 engine. I'm not going to use this flywheel. This is the flywheel that was on the Ford tractor. I just wanted to show it does in fact fit the crank. Only 2 of the bolts here in here, and obviously if you turn this, there'll always be 2 bolts that actually line up for the bolts in the crank. As you can see, the 2 bolts kind of would hold it on there, but it's not proper. I've seen one guy online drill new holes for the 8 new holes, but that's not exactly good either. You lose a lot of strength whenever you drill new holes in there. So would it work? Yes, but I'm going to order a custom-made flywheel. I don't want to have any issues with this thing coming apart. However, I want to show you guys the PTO drive. This is the piece that the PTO slides into, and there's the support bearing for the input shaft of the transmission. So this goes in here like that. As you can see, that doesn't fit inside the end of the crankshaft. So what do we do about that? Well, I'm not sure yet, to be honest. The guy I talked to who's going to be making my flywheel said that they have provisions to work with that, but I'm worried that the PTO shaft might stick in and bottom out, so I've really got to do some research. But anyways, made it this far. Let's see what we can do next. So here we are at the bell housing of the tractor, and I've put this PTO drive right where it was. I found the witness marks for that bearing. You can see there. You can see the old line where the bearing used to ride. So we're gonna put, if I can do this, 2 hands, let's see. So basically right there. So that's where that sits, guys. So as you can see, the PTO shaft extends through the center of this thing. Not quite sure what's gonna happen with that. So that's one stumbling point that we're at right now. So as you can see, the flywheel is gonna sit right about here. So anyway, actually the flywheel will sit right here because this is the original location. So we're gonna have to figure something out about this, guys. All right, so here we go. I've measured this several times. Basically, I've got to cut this piece out to that white line. So I don't have to take a tremendous amount of material off, but that is a pretty significant chunk of steel. So at the very least, what I'm going to do first is cut out this passage, because that's where the bolt goes in for that flange, and I'll show you that. So right here, that bolt, I want to be able to draw that bolt out of there someday if I ever want to take this off. I'm going to take that down to this line where this metal plate is. So that whole bell housing is going to look just like that. So as you can see, that bolt right there is going to need to be able to pass through this opening here. So I might just take this whole piece right here, take that right out. I don't think it's going to hurt the structure too much. Well, there's not really much I can do if I want to keep that heat exchanger. Okay, so about half an hour worth of grinding. This is what I'm left with. It comes flush with this plate, like we saw needs. I don't know why I left this piece. I just thought it would look kind of cool to make it look kind of somewhat factory if anyone ever looks at this down the road. This channel gives that bolt the ability to be removed, and I figured I only needed like half an inch, maybe 5/8 of an inch, but I made this bigger, this channel here deeper, so that I could remove that neck if I needed to. So anyway, guys, I believe I've triple checked this thing at this point. I believe that's good. I'm going to paint that, and then that's one step closer to get the engine in. Just like that, it looks like it was always supposed to be there. A little bit of Ford blue. So I'm hoping that my measuring has paid off, because that looks pretty darn sharp, I think. Looks like it was kind of meant to be there. Looks nice and flush. So I think that will have a really good fit. We'll find out whenever we put the motor up to it. Okay, so I need a flywheel for this tractor now. I'm at the point where I can't do anything else on the tractor until I assemble the thing. I need the engine in the tractor at this point, and I can't do that until I get a flywheel. So, two options on the flywheel and clutch. The first option is, do we take the old flywheel, bring it to a machine shop, have them cut out or fill the center holes here, and re-drill these holes, as well as the PTO drive. Several downfalls to that is this is cast. Not sure how that's going to take to machining. And also, the machine shops don't work for free, so I'm going to pay a little bit of money. Second option is, do I contact one of these high-performance tractor shops, machine shops, and spend a lot of money on a proper flywheel, a billet flywheel, and a nodular iron clutch pressure plate assembly, and get maybe 1 or 2 disc clutches. So obviously I wanted to avoid that second option just because I'm starting to spend a little bit of money on this project and it's scaring me a little bit. Let's be honest. Tractor was running perfectly before I started this whole project. So anyway, what I decided to do was to go with the second option. I watched countless videos on YouTube about these tractors just being cut in half whenever that flywheel grenades itself. And the people, the professionals I talk to that are involved in pulling, or like tractor pulling, mind you, are all saying the same thing. Like, spend the money on a good flywheel, good pressure plate setup. You won't ever regret it. So, not that I really want to make this a pulling tractor, but I might want to pull with it someday. It'd be kind of fun. But anyway, that's what I did. So I contacted, there's several of these companies throughout the United States that will make custom stuff like this for high performance pulling tractors. I contacted Atlas Tractor after several other failed phone calls. The guys didn't even give me the time of day. I guess they just thought I was fishing for information or something, but I had a lot of questions. I didn't know what I was buying, and you know, the cost of these things are expensive, and I didn't really want to spend my hard-earned money blindly. So anyway, I talked to Atlas Tractor. They're out of Minnesota. The guy who owns the shop, his name is Carl. The guy's great. He spent like an hour on the phone with me the first time. Second time I called him before I ordered the thing, he spent like another half an hour. You know, I sent pictures of my bell housing, the flywheels that I had, several other issues that I thought I would run into, and the guy was great. Like, he took his time and literally answered every question that I had. So as far as I'm concerned, awesome customer service. And I also found out he builds like the modular transmissions that go inside the cases of these tractors, you know, for high performance stuff. So he makes hardened input shafts, the gears, like all kinds of cool stuff. So anyway, if you guys ever do need, give him a call. He's been great for me. So anyway, I will show you now what the UPS man just dropped off to my place of business. And he was struggling to lift these things, and so they are heavy. So here's the first box, 77 pounds. It's a heavy box. Wow. Check this out. Wow, that is a heavy piece of metal right there. SFI rated right there. That's cool. Atlas even stamped their brand into that. Wow. Oh, geez, I gotta use 2 hands, guys. This is a massive pressure plate. It's got a lot of metal on that sucker. I just want to take a moment. Look at all the springs in this thing. That's a lot of springs. That's gonna produce some serious clamping force. That is awesome. So I just wanted to show you guys too, this is the thing that was holding up the whole order. This is what took 3.5 months to get this. Starter spacer. Oh, that's cool. I guess we'll need a starter spacer for this. Okay, here's the second box. 85 pounds. let's get in this one. All right, heavy. All right, I just wanted to show you guys. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I'm gonna try to show you. Check out this cool tape. Atlas Tractor. That's cool, packing tape that has this brand. I have to go through that paper just to make sure there's nothing in there later. Okay, so we're some hardware. Grade 8 stuff. Awesome. There's another clutch disc I see. This is really well packaged, I'll tell you. This thing would survive a UPS driver, that's for sure. Another clutch disc. Looks like some paperwork in there. All right, let me get this thing out. Okay, so here's our second clutch disc. Let me show you the beauty of this flywheel. So I was talking to him, and I said that because this 5000 has a slightly different input shaft, he built this wear shim on the flywheel. These shims, I guess these are shims, every one of these washer stacks. Beautiful work. I mean, look at the recesses. And this here is kind of why it was drawn to the flywheel. As you can see, this spline, let me see if I can pick this up. Wow, making me work for it. That spline, oh wow, these are all nuts and bolts. Holy cow. That's a lot of welding too. Welded the ring gear on the thing. Anyway, getting sidetracked here. What I wanted to show you was this hub is separate from the flywheel. I can remove this hub if I want to. But anyway, look at how beautiful that is. This was one chunk of billet. And now it is a flywheel. One thing I wanted to show, I don't know how well this is going to catch on camera, but that is the same size as the old PTO drive, so I'll have to machine the crankshaft to accept this piece, which shouldn't be too bad, so that I can use this piece. So one thing I wanted this for was so that I didn't have to have this piece being free-floating on the crank. Now it's basically going to be the same piece as the flywheel. It's going to be a lot stronger. Here we have the old flywheel right next to the new flywheel. This I want to do a little photo op. Looks to be pretty much dead nuts right on. So that makes me feel a lot better. Awesome. Just double checked. This is in fact a 15 tooth spline, same as this. So I was looking through all these boxes. I do not have a clutch lineup tool, you know, so I can assemble this clutch and everything. I'll have to reach out to him and see if he could provide one. So anyway, everything looks good so far. I mean, everything looks really nice. Pretty happy with what I've seen so far. This is the new clutch disc. As you can see, it fits really nice on the input shaft of the transmission. So that's good. These are pretty darn beefy. And again, everything is SFI rated, guys, so that makes it really nice. So if you look, there's two different dimension roll-offs here. This one is quite a bit thicker. This one is thinner. This feels like it's aluminum. This is actually steel. So this is aluminum and this is steel. So what those are for is that this one, this big thick one, fits into this notch on the intermediate plate. So the reason for this wear plate was not so much that it was a performance upgrade, but yes, it is to some degree. Because in the future, if I ever need to redo the surface on this flywheel, I can just take this wear plate off. But it's for the input shaft. Let me just show you that. So on the 5000 input shaft, there's a big space here, so the splines go back further than like on the 8000 or the 9000 series Fords that are common in pulling. So anyway, that's why that wear plate is there, to bring the clutch discs in to fit on the spline. I marked on here with a nice precision square where the bearing is, and then I've gone ahead and marked on here where the clutch disc is, right there, And then I've gone ahead and put the second clutch disc on, and I've made the mark for that. So we've got a very accurate dimension of how things are laid out. Now, I have gone ahead and done the same thing on this flywheel. The only difference is, do you see how this sticks out further than the face of the flywheel? So I had to make one of these that held in so it's flush. This can show it a little better. So it's flush with the flywheel. So what I did, took me a minute, but again, very scientific, guys. So I put this in here and I marked, you know, with a thing on the back like I just showed you, where the bearing is and where the clutch disc is. So now what we can do is we can put this basically right up against the crankshaft, or where the crankshaft will be, and we've got two different rulers that show us where things are. And as you can see, the bearing on Atlas flywheel is in just a little bit, and the clutch discs are in just a little bit compared to the original one. We have a witness mark right here where the old bearing used to sit. So that lines up perfectly, and as you can see, the splines on the clutch disc line up perfectly. Now we'll hold this one again 1/10 of an inch in from the input shaft, so we're measuring from the crankshaft. And now you can see this is where the bearing will support. So most of this will be supported, maybe 3/4 of the shaft will be supported, but there'll be some airspace. And like half of this clutch disc spline will be engaged, and this disc will be fully engaged. And again, I'm just doing this for my own satisfaction, guys. The other thing that we hadn't figured on is the crankshaft stick out. On the 7.8 engine, the crankshaft could stick out further, and hence that would move that whole stick backwards and it would bring it into line up. So here we are at the back of the Ford 7.8 liter 6-cylinder that is going in my tractor. We're gonna just make that line a little bolder just because. So basically that's lined up on the end of our level. We're measuring the crank stick out. So this right here is the Ford 7.8 crank stick out. Here we are at the back of the original Ford 4-cylinder. Now we've got a gasket here which will burn, I don't know, 30 thousandths maybe, but that won't really be a deal breaker for our measurements here. Edge of the ruler here, or the whatever you want to call it, level. And so there is the line for our original Ford motor. Now as you can see, there is a difference there. So Carl knows what he's doing. I just wanted to double check that because my own OCD would not let me sleep at night. The 7.8 crank sticks out further than the stock one. This dimension right here is almost 1/8 of an inch. So all we do now is we take this one from Carl and move it up 1/8 of an inch. Look how perfect that is, guys. Look how perfect that is. That will bring the bearing and the discs right into spec, and that will make me feel better whenever I try to go to sleep at night. This stuff will not keep me up anymore. So very happy that I took the time to do that. Just, we can put that right there just to kind of see the difference. So again, guys, it doesn't have to be super precise measuring, but this is going to be very close. So now we can feel much better about putting this thing together. So I know I ramble, guys, but to summarize that last couple minutes of measuring and everything else, the Ford 7.8 6-cylinder engine that I'm using has a bigger or a taller crank stick out than the original Ford tractor engine did. So Carl has engineered this flywheel to mimic the original flywheel distances that the Ford tractor provided. Even though everything is totally different. Different engine, different flywheel, different PTO drive, different clutches. Carl has done the math and he's figured out that basically this whole combination will fit perfectly on that input shaft for my Ford tractor. So hats off to you, Carl. Great job. Just in case anyone wanted to know, this is the invoice. Of course, I've whited out my addresses and everything else. But this is what I paid for the whole thing. $3,500 bucks. I figure, you know, as far as custom making any kind of flywheel components and pressure plates and everything else, that's going to be about what you pay. So there it is, guys. Now it's time to make this Ford 7.8 engine accept this. See, right now it does not. We need to make this hole bigger. Okay, so I temporarily bolted this drive onto the crankshaft so that I can make a mark, and I did that with a permanent marker all around that drive shaft so it's perfectly lined up, because 2 of these bolts always line up but the others do not. So that is a good bit of material that I need to remove. Now, how do we go about removing that material? It's a good question. No one's gonna like this, but basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a carbide burr, and I am going to grind this out by hand until I reach the point where this will fit in. I know the proper way to do this is to take the crankshaft out of the engine, bring it to a machine shop, and machine down what I'm going to do by hand. However, I am not going down that wormhole, because I know if I take the crank out, I'm going to find bearings that are questionable, or I'm going to find rings that are questionable, and it's going to turn into a big ordeal, which I'm not prepared for. This motor ran great. It was awesome. So if I can do this in a controlled environment where I just do a little at a time and then just cool the bit as I go, this is not going to be a problem. For one, because this is not being used to center. This shoulder is being used to center the flywheel. This just needs clearance. So I'm really not too worried about it. And love it or hate it, that's what I'm gonna do. I don't really know what else you could do to make this flywheel fit, short of taking the crankshaft out. And I'm not gonna do that, guys. This is the burr. This came from Kimball Midwest. This is a black diamond 3/8 by 3/4 quarter-inch burr, and this thing is gnarly. Supposedly this is great for hardened steel like this crankshaft, stainless steel, and other really hard materials. So that's what we're going to use. And the reason I'm using this burr is because it's flat at the bottom. So what I can do, I can get in here and I can just go around and around and around until that hole is as big as I need to have it. So I'm just gonna make a cut and just see what happens. See if this is even gonna be, see if this is even gonna work. Let's just see how it goes. That eats that material up like it's nothing. That's gonna work. Now, I don't care if this takes me a couple days of just doing a little bit and then letting it cool down, doing a little bit more, and just take my time so this thing doesn't heat up and lose its temper, or it doesn't dull the bit, because that sucker was like $100. So here's an update. I've been about 10 minutes worth of grinding. I've had to stop every so often, you know, to dunk the blade in oil just to let it cool down. I don't want to overheat the blade. And it's still very sharp. And I've gotten quite a bit of material carved out of there. All right, here's another update. We're getting closer and closer to that purple line. Okay guys, check it out. We are 2 size. It took me a while, but we've got this now, so that fits in there very nicely. Yeah, it's a little sloppy, but I made it that way just because I'm not perfect. And I've got it so that no matter what position I use in the crankshaft, this will go on and not bind. So I think that's just about perfect. I mean, as perfect as you can do by hand. It took me a while going back and forth with this piece here, but as a result we have that hole basically, in my opinion, it's very, very good. So this goes, I mean, there's no shutter up and down, absolutely no shutter. I don't know if you can see that, but there is a little, you can do this, so it's not 100%, but I'd say it's under 1/1000th of an inch. If I were to put grease on this and put that in there, I mean, it holds itself, so how bad can it actually be? And I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'm very happy with the way this turned out. And let's remind you, this does not need to center the flywheel. This here is what's going to center that flywheel. And I don't think we've lost any strength me doing that. So I'm very happy with that. It took a while, but that's kind of what, in my opinion, what you have to do to make this happen. And this one more thing, guys. I know that this is not a perfect situation. However, me grinding at the center line of the crankshaft is not going to throw this crank off balance. For one, we've got a 70 or 80 pound flywheel, as well as, you know, an 80 pound clutch. So we've got probably 150 or 160 pounds way out. It's not like that. Probably it's 1/10 of an inch, I would guess, that it's out on this crankshaft. I mean, it's very, very close to being perfect. So that little bit is not going to affect the balance on this engine. And quite frankly, you're never going to feel it with the RPMs that this tractor is going to run. Here is the moment I've been waiting for a very long time. Will this sucker fit on the engine? And I can't see. Okay. Don't drop this, whatever you do, Mark. Alright, so we are at 1.575, and this is dead nuts right there. 1.1, well, 1.573. So that tells me that this outer surface of the crank probably has to be polished just a little bit, and then this sucker will go right on. Alright, so I just cleaned that up a little bit. That will go on. I just used a few strokes of my dead blow hammer just to kind of see, you know, if that's just sticking or if that's just a really tight fit, and it is a very tight fit. So once I actually put all the bolts on, that'll draw on, but I don't want to do that yet because I still got a lot of work to do on the engine itself. So that's just a really tight fit on this lip here. As you can see, there's just a faint line where this has been running, but that will suck right on with the bolts, and this here isn't even touching. I mean, it is touching, but it's not holding it. So same dimension, that goes on there really easy. Cool, guys. This is the Ford tractor bell housing, and as you can see, we've got 3 3/8 bolts that hold that metal spacer plate. So I'm going to make that new bell housing, the new 7.8 bell housing, fit this. Here is the spacer plate, and as you can see, we've got holes in the plate, and we've just got these bosses that don't have any threads, so we're going to make those threads. I got to be careful here not to go too deep, hit that water jacket. Maybe I'll make the threads a little shorter on this one just to avoid any issues. Alright, so I got this hole all tapped and drilled and everything else. It was going really difficult. I think my 3/8 by 16 tap had just seen its last tap. So anyway, I got a new tap and it just went like butter. So let me show you. This is a 5/16 hole that we're drilling, of course, because this is a 3/8 hole, or a 3/8 thread, I should say. So on the tap chart it says that it wants a 5/16 drill. So this cast iron usually taps pretty nice. So now that we've got that established, so anyway guys, I did manage to drill this hole without getting into that water jacket, which, best case scenario. Yeah, this fresh tap, man, this thing it's just cruising through that material. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I did put a permanent mark right there so that I can see once it gets to the bottom, so I don't jam on the tap and break it off. Alright, so now I've got all 3 of these holes done, and a 3/8 bolt threads right in there perfectly. So now I can bolt this plate on the back of the engine. See how it all lines up. So we always end our tapping hole with a nice chamfer. So the cool thing is, these are the bolts that actually came out of the Ford 5000, and we're going to reuse them just because it's little stuff like that, in my eyes, that really makes this build cool. So there we are, guys. That's an easy step. That's done. Now the only thing that's left for me to do on this engine really is to change this rear main seal. Now that I've got all the grinding and everything done, I'm going to change this rear main seal, and then we can probably go ahead and get this flywheel mounted permanently. I've decided to change this rear main seal just because we're in here. There's never going to be a better time than right now to change this, so might as well. So I picked this up down in Napa. This is actually for like a Ford L8000. BS 40635 is the Felpro part number. It's a hard steel seal, and it's got the cork gasket. So let's rip this back off, take the housing off, and we can look at that gasket. All right, so I got all these bolts across, and then there was 2 up underneath that went through the oil pan. And I'm just gonna see. That seems like it's on there pretty good. Ah, yeah, good. Okay. Oh, mercy. All right. Yo. All right. There's the back end of the crank, guys. So this is the seal face, or the seal holder, whatever you want to call it, cover. And it looks like I just got to drive that seal out very carefully and scrape off this old gasket. We'll reuse this gasket with a little bit of gasket maker, and we'll put it all back together. So here's our new seal, and there is a spring on the back side, so we got to be careful whenever we're driving this seal. So check that out. It's all in there nice, fully seated. Now I'm just going to clean this up and get it ready for reinstallation. All right, we got that rear main seal on there. I had to put some RTV silicone on the bottom here, as you can see, but I used petroleum-based Vaseline for that cork seal. That should give it the best chance of sealing. And tighten that up. These 2 bolts on the bottom are important, don't forget those. So we should be all set. Hopefully no more issues for a long time. That's the old gasket. Probably good that we did this step to replace the seal. Okay, so a couple days later, Carl has sent me a nice clutch alignment tool. So this is designed to fit into this bearing to center itself instead of going in the PTO drive. So I mean, that'll be fine. That's cool though. That's a really nice tool. Looks like he turned that on the lathe and made that himself. Cool. All right. Excellent. Now we are ready to start putting this flywheel on the engine permanently. All right, so this is the last time you guys will see this flywheel from this side. Is I'm going to mount the flywheel and I'm going to draw the flywheel on. I'll then back the bolts out, put Loctite on, and then torque them to 150 foot-pounds. I'm going to do this on a time lapse, so you guys probably won't see every little detail, but you guys will get the idea. That was an extremely nice fit. I barely had to use the ratchet to draw those on, and that just sucked right on the end of that crankshaft. Perfect fit. I will now take each of those bolts out one by one, Loctite them, put them back on, and torque them to 150. All right, so I know that was probably a blur, but I've got each and every one of these bolts Loctited and torqued to 150 foot-pounds. This is my really primitive way of stopping the flywheel from turning while I torque it. Now I've got to start working on this clutch. I just want to take the time and show this is how the clutch discs go together. Now you don't have to stagger these gaps with the outer disc and the inner disc, but I did, if you can see that or not. It doesn't make a difference, I don't think. But so anyway, the intermediate plate is in there, the two clutch discs are in there. There's a little play, but not much. I can hold that up as I tighten the nuts for this bad boy. This pressure plate is pretty beefy. This is going to add a lot of weight to this thing. Alright, so all that's left now is to torque each of these bolts to 65 foot-pounds. We're going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, so that went well. This thing is pretty much ready to go in. Look how nice that input shaft tool goes in and out of there. That thing is dialed. So anyway, look how beefy this thing is. I just called and talked to Carl because I had a few questions. He said this pressure plate basket, I guess you'd say, started out life as one big chunk of steel. That is billet. It's machined down, and this big piece of metal in here, that is actually cast and then machined. And the flywheel is actually billet, of course. So it probably doesn't need it, but I'm going to go ahead and replace this throwout bearing. And I was looking in here, and there's a bunch of clutch parts in here. I'll be willing to bet this thing at some point in its life had a pretty catastrophic failure. So this is pretty easy to take this out. Basically just put a big pair of pliers on here like that, and then this will slide right out. And that's got a monster spring on there, so you really have to be careful with that. So that's just a big chunk of cast iron. Oh wow, look. We've got a brake there I didn't know about. Come on, old girl. There. Because it's... I wonder how that would have broken, because that's on the pull side. Wow. So anyway, yeah, that's broken. So it looks like that has to get pressed on here. Let's go do that. That's the part number C5NN7571H. As you can see, this is a pretty good fit. Not a lot of shatter, and that slides good. So I got this one. This is the replacement. This is, you can't really get OEM stuff anymore. So this is an aftermarket, of course. A little sloppy compared to the original, but I think it'll still work. It's just much sloppier than I would have liked. I filled that channel with high temperature wheel bearing grease. So hopefully what happens is over the years, that'll maintain some grease that's in there. So now that I've got this installed on the clutch fork itself, that's a really tight fit side to side. I don't think there'll be any issues with that, just because that does not shake side to side whatsoever, and that's the most important feature of that. So anyway, guys, I am happy with that. Let's move on. So one thing I did, this PTO shaft on the end was a little bit flared because it sticks through here, and those teeth had been worn over time. Not worn enough to merit a replacement. So anyway, I got this so it lines really nice, so that way whenever the engine is dangling here, hopefully I won't have issues with that PTO shaft lining up. So now I'm in construction, I guess. Go from everything. So anyway, what I'm doing here is I'm building the floor. These are 2x12 planks. These are rough cut 2x4. I think those are hemlock boards. And I'm making a cradle or a ramp, whatever you want to call it, for the engine crane to sit on so that I can put this engine in and the floor will be level. I'm going to use the engine crane. So anyway, I've got a bunch of stuff here. I'm going to take a while and just level this thing up, screw all the boards down, and that should be a very strong platform to put this engine crane on. Also, I've got this weird looking thing, which is going to come in handy when I get the engine in. So you can see that's chained around the rear axle. Got a 3/4 inch bolt down there holding this. This is an old ramp that I used. I actually cut it up for this purpose. As you can see, this bolted there and it's chained on either side. That is going to be what holds the front of the engine whenever it's out in the air here, so I don't have to support the front of the engine with a jack, because again, I've got a weird floor here. We're doing all this just because we're not on concrete, but this thing has been out here for like since March. April, May, June, July, August, October. I mean, it's almost going on 7 months. Well, 6 months anyway. So if this were my shop, I would be irritated having this thing underfoot. So anyway, we do it outside. We work like the old timers used to, in the gravel, out front of the shop. So here we are. So here it is. So here it is, guys. I know it looks a little ridiculous, but basically the front wheels of the engine crane are going to be right here on either side. Then the middle isn't going to have a lot of weight, but back here is going to be where the other end of the engine crane is. I've measured this all out. It should be pretty much right on. So that's really well supported, and that is really well supported. Plus, when I put these 2x12s on and screw them all down, that thing is going to be a rock solid base. Should be really flat and easy to roll the engine crane. The wheels may crunch in a little bit into the wood, but I mean, short of doing this on the dirt, I think this is going to be a lot nicer. All right, so there it is, guys, in all of its glory. Now, this outer plank here is basically just so that we can walk around. It's not really structural. And this outer plank here is just for us to walk around. The weight is going to be held on this one and these three and this one right here. So those are extremely solid. This should be plenty rugged to support that weight, and it's pretty much dead nuts level. A lot of work, but whenever we get ready to set this engine, it's going to make all this work worth it. All right, so this is a big day. We're finally going to attempt to get this big old engine off of this trailer with the old David Brown. I don't know if this has the capacity to lift that engine, but we are going to find out. So the idea is hoist this engine, drive the old 8N out of here, drive forward, set it down on the planks on this cribbing that I have right here. Let's see how it goes. All right, so we just had a catastrophic failure. As you can see now, the engine is not in a good spot. Tractor's covered in hydraulic oil. I just blew a hose That one right up there, as you can see, it's pretty crappy. It should have been changed a long time ago. But luckily it's a short run. I'm gonna go ahead and get that fixed, and then at least I can get the bucket out of here. And I'm not gonna lift off the front of the bucket like I am here. I'm gonna lift off the back of the bucket so it's closer. Maybe it'll be less stress on the ram. What do you do? She's an tired old girl, but still can lift a lot of weight. Okay, so here we are. Got some new hoses. Got some chafing gear on those. This hose here is new. Figured we'd do it all at once. Get all the broken hoses out of the way. So I've turned the engine around here so I could see and load better. And I think I got very lucky, guys. This oil filter housing took a great deal of the force. I don't know if it ruined the housing or just the filter. I've got it blocked up here just so it won't slide, but it doesn't look like the oil pan got hurt too badly. I mean, there's just a couple this is where the bucket came down right here, dented the valve cover a little. The intake looks to be okay, but definitely gonna have to look it over when I get it up in the air on the tractor. But I think we got lucky, guys. So we had to call in the big guns, had to get Dad's Dynaho 160 over here. But the engine is finally on its cradle. Now all we gotta do is get the engine crane over here, and that should be relatively straightforward. So super happy that it's here in one piece. The oil pan did get damaged a little bit from where it got dropped. Really can't do much about that. That hose breaking, I really didn't think that was gonna happen, but anywho, what do you do? I can replace the oil pan easy enough, but luckily no one got hurt. So let's call it a weekend, guys. So now we got the engine crane here. Just a matter of getting this thing positioned around the engine, and we'll give it a test lift, see how much this sucker weighs. And then we'll start working on getting the engine in the tractor. So I'm going to keep this motor on this trailer just to kind of keep it out of the way, but also to keep it handy if I need to move it. I may need some components off of this engine to complete my build, but as you saw, that was 875 pounds. I'm curious to see what the new motor is going to weigh. Okay, so here we are. The engine is totally supported by the crane, and as you can see here, 1,737 pounds. So that has lost a lot of weight with the truck flywheel and the truck bell housing. So you've shed down quite a bit. As you can see, this thing is totally free. Awesome. Okay, so what I did here, I wanted to get this bell housing level this way and plumb. So I guess that'd be plumb and level, whatever you want to call it. Took the air out of this tire so that way this thing could flatten out. We are on a side hill here, so now tractor is pretty much level, and bell housing is perfectly level. Now I've got to get the engine leveled, because for some reason, whenever these Ford engines were in the trucks, they sat pretty much sideways, just like that. So these engine lifting points right here are basically allowing the engine to be perfectly level with that front motor mount. It's hard to see from here, But as you can see, the top bolt here and there, the engine is effectively sitting like this. So I've got to rechain it and get it so it's level. That way, whenever I go to put these two together, they'll both be happy and everything will go nice. So let me just show, for example, this is the bell housing. As you can see, we're pretty much right on. And then these top motor mount bolts, I don't know if you can see that very well, but that is pretty much right on as well. Alright, so this engine is balancing here. And as you can see, this is my solution. I wrap the chain around the intake with just a little bit of preload, just to kind of get this thing sitting the way it should. So now, as you can see, I've got that sucker pretty much right on. I mean, as close as this is. Pretty close to being level that way. So between this bell housing and the engine, I should be pretty darn close to being ready to mate these two together for the final time. All right, so we got the engine in place and it went right up nice to the bell housing, but for some reason we've got this really aggressive stop to the crank. So the engine will turn and then it just kind of binds. So something is hitting. My guess is something in the clutch. So it's hitting the bell housing. So we gotta take it back apart, figure out what's going on, and fix it and put it back together. Okay, so as you can see, there's a little metallic mark right there and right there. Basically what's happening is these washers stick up quite a ways and the washers are hitting right there. So two things, what I could do is I could grind the washers flat. I don't really want to do that, so I'm going to clearance the bell housing. I'm just basically going to grind this all down flat. Take a lot of material out of there probably, but it doesn't look like it really needs all that much. Just that hump, maybe 1/8 of an inch or so of grinding, and that'll be all squared away. I don't know how well you can see this, but basically what was happening is the washer right here was hitting on that just ever so slightly, and that's what was making it stop. So I've got some clearancing done on the bell housing. Hopefully that's enough. Also, what I've done, or I will do, these are metric 12 washers, and as you can see, they're quite a bit smaller than just a regular 1/2 inch grade 8 washer. So we're going to put those on there, and I've already done one here. And as you can see, it sticks out a lot less than the grade 8s. We'll do that all around, do these one by one. Try putting this motor back in the tractor. All right, so I got a bit of paint on that, so that way it's just not bare and it won't rust. Also, if I have any more issues and something hits, it will make a nice scratch in here, so I will know exactly where it's hitting. So as you can see now, this is the profile. This is pretty much flush with the pressure plate. So guys, I don't want to jinx myself, but I'm convinced this engine is in its home for the final time. I have a 7.8 now mounted up to my Ford 5000. How cool is that? So I just spent a couple minutes and I barred the engine over. Doesn't feel like it's hitting anywhere. This thing bars all the way over. Very happy about that. It does turn over difficult because we're slinging around 6 pretty big pistons. So anyway, guys, no binding. Sweet. So I'm probably gonna end the video here, guys, because this is gonna be a long video and it's probably gonna be a 2 or 3 part series of me building this tractor. So here it is, guys. This is as far as I'm gonna get on this video. I'm gonna crane up the front of this with a binder so that I can take the crane out and the engine will support itself. I'll show you that before I close this video out, but it's been a tremendous amount of work. As you can see, this is the detail where I had to grind, and it took a lot of measuring, but I can remove that now if I have to. Obviously the bolt holes don't line up, but I've got something in mind to make this rear bracket. Bunch of little stuff. We'll show you some more next videos. So what I've got going on here, I've got a chain with a binder up to this contraption. This used to be a ramp for my low bed trailer. And I've got 2 chains going right back to the rear axle. The idea is I need to get that blocking out from under the front so I can take all this ramping apart and get it out of the way. Hoping that that will hold up the front of the engine so it doesn't slouch. But it's going to be putting a lot of weight right there. So anyway, I will show you guys more. So anyway, that's my idea. We'll see if it works.